Okay, guys. So, since we had a little snafu with class yesterday, I wanted to go ahead and get you guys started on your first project, which is going to be typologies. Welcome, by the way. I'm so excited that I'll actually get to see you guys again, and hopefully we'll work out all the shenanigans. Just so you know, class will be at 11:30 on Mondays. I'm also teaching 139 at the same time, so we're kind of doing some juggling, but we have a 4-hour window, so we will play with that. Anyway, let's talk about typologies. So typologies are kind of cool. I thought this would be a really fun project to start with because you can actually take a pretty simplistic idea and engage with it. It does have some rather sinister beginnings. Francis Galton was actually a eugenist. And when we first start seeing a lot of typologies, it was actually, they were created by this gentleman. There were actually several eugenics kind of working in this vein, but I shouldn't say I like his work, but I think it's really interesting the way that he compiled these typologies. So he was primarily working with people, and what he would do was create multiple layerings of on a print and try and create kind of these composite images of stereotypes, and again, like trying to prove the idea of eugenics, that certain biological traits or whatever is exemplified some sort of behavior, whether that was criminal or not. But a lot of his stuff focused on disease and criminality and whatnot. But I do find it really interesting that, you know, he was kind of making these composites of individuals and then again layering them. So, you know, taking multiple negatives and stacking them to kind of create these one-off, almost like, you know, the universal human. Here's some composites of criminals that he did, and kind of trying to think, you know, like that criminals all look alike. It's awful. This just popped into my head. But you guys know how my brain works. I was just thinking how funny it would be to do this with like Tinder profiles or something like that. And I actually, I should do that because I have a whole bunch. And that's a whole nother thing. My brain just kind of strayed a little bit for a minute. But like I said, here's some of his composites of criminals. These are some Russian soldiers that, again, like, so it's got all the individuals around the edges and then the composite individual in the middle. Kind of fascinating stuff, you know. And then these ones I thought were really interesting. So he did composites of scientists. Again, so this idea that you could kind of take a very similar structure and apply it across numerous subjects and then kind of pull them together. So typologies aren't typically this idea of putting multiple images into one, but this was Francis Galton's kind of intro into these things. And hopefully you guys, there's an article on D2L that really has an interesting way of systematically kind of breaking down typologies into 4 different factors. And then I also put a link to a really cool typologist that works for the Peabody Museum in Massachusetts. And I encourage you guys to read that article and also look at the typologies because they're pretty cool. This is Diana Zlatsk. I can't pronounce her last name. She's the one who created the typologies link, and she really just kind of goes around. She does do some of her own photography from all of the stuff that she has at the Peabody Museum, but she also just kind of uses found images as well, and then starts to create these typologies. So these are all little teeny tiny cases that have little teeny tiny shells in them. And again, you kind of get this, you know, really digging into using repetition and variation and kind of pulling together these compositions in a very systematic way. Here's some keys that are really cool. So like I said, something, you know, like I said, it's really simplistic. You just kind of have to go out and find something, a subject matter, that you can repeat with some variation. little toy cars, very, lighting is consistent. And that's in the article that I put there for you. That consistency is one of the elements that the that the author uses to kind of classify the strength of a typology. Some really cool wrenches. I don't know where she found all these. I think these are awesome. I think oftentimes if you can find something that we have a very specific idea of what it looks like in our heads, but then find really, really cool variations of that, like this set of wrenches, I think is really interesting. Because I think when you think of a wrench, like I think of this little guy right here. Like I have a bunch of those in my tool chest, but seeing this really cool and interesting variation on that is really fascinating. Okay, so the next artist I want to talk about is a friend of mine. His name is Hassan Alai, and his story is really, really interesting. So Hassan, let me just go ahead and click on one of his images here. So Hassan is of Middle Eastern descent, and he travels a ton for art. He also works for Creative Capital, which is a really cool nonprofit that works with helping artists, and they grant tons of money and all this fun stuff, and they do a lot of support. But anyway, so Hassan travels all over the country, and he was targeted after the 9/11 attacks as a potential hazard to the American public by the FBI. And so, not being a hazard to the FBI, what Hassan did was he actually really engaged with his FBI agent and was kind of like, okay, what do you need from me so that I'm not seen as a threat to the American people? And the guy was like, well, just let us know when you're going out of town and where you're going and all of this stuff. And what Hassan actually ended up doing was kind of overloading his FBI agent with with data. He started photographing everywhere he went. He would take pictures of his meals. He would take pictures of his receipts when he went to a grocery store. And he really just kind of started sending all of this information to the FBI and overloading them with all of his stuff. And so, here's all of his hotel rooms and various places that he has stayed over time. And what he ended up doing, and I'll show you once I'm done with the PowerPoint, was he created a website that he just uploads. He automatically uploads imagery and little texts and things like that. And it just kind of randomly streams through all of these places that he's been. And this project has been going on since 2002, I believe. And then the cool thing is, so, now he has this insane archive of images of all these things that he's done. He also has an Instagram, and I sent him a note because I can't remember the name of it, but he photographs all the toilets where he goes and posts those on Instagram, which I think has a really fun sense of humor to it. But now that he has this huge archive of imagery, he started delving kind of more into this sort of presentation. So he's now doing these really intense installations of, this is all created of photographs from the Orwell Project. And then these obviously get placed in kind of more fine art institutions. So kind of taking it from the digital realm where it began and then creating it into some sort of physical form. This one is particularly beautiful. And I think it's interesting too, he's doing these really cool patterns and things like that, but the images are all relatively basic, not even great like Instagram food photography or something like that. They're all just kind of these documents of a life being lived through travel. So pretty cool stuff. And like I said, I'll show you guys his website when we get done with the PowerPoint. Next photographer I want to show you is another typologist. His name is Christian Webb, and he is a US photographer. And again, just kind of creating these really kind of interesting, I think these are just little sheds, but finding that variation. His work tends to be really colorful and simplistic. And these, I hope you're kind of seeing a pattern here. As you're building these, you really want to kind of do at least 9 to 12, you know, and kind of really coming up with that grid, maybe 25 or 20, but figuring out what works for how your images look. These are all just glassware from above, but there's a consistency to the way things are photographed and laid out together. Oh, and these are done in Photoshop. I know we've only done a little teensy tiny bit of Photoshop, so I will try and do a quick little demo for you guys too on just kind of layers and Photoshop basics, so that I'm pretty sure Josh is good with Photoshop, but Nick, I know you're kind of new to it, so I'll do a little demo for that too and upload it. But here's some, like I said, glassware. I think these are just tissue paper, but I love how like all the crinkles and the, you know, the really, you know, think about how you can change maybe your framing on these. That's the other element I really like about Christian's work, is that, you know, he kind of plays with a non-traditional, he has some that are just circles. These ones are kind of that elongated little slice, something as simple as clouds. You know, this one really made me think of Colorado because we have such cool skies. He has another one here that, yeah, this one, of just kind of the different gradations of the sky. And, you know, without knowing what this is, it almost just becomes a little color palette. But knowing that these are horizons gives it kind of a different appeal. And then this one I really enjoyed too, the idea of silhouettes. And kind of photographing these buildings and then isolating them as a silhouette. So just really, really exploring kind of those possibilities. Here's another, this is an Instagram account I follow. It's called My Hotel Carpet. And again, another traveler who basically stays in hotels all over the world. He's a pilot and photographs the carpet. And so just this, and the whole stream is just one of these things where, you know, it's just hotel carpets. And he was obviously kind of inactive for about a year while COVID was running, but is up and running again. So all new carpets to see. This is Matthew Chattel, who I just kind of stumbled upon him. He's been photographing all of the kind of sort of COVID, I don't even know what you would call that. I guess like directional, you know, like stand here 6 feet apart and whatnot. So his whole, most of his feed, he's got some other stuff in there too, is these similar photographs of just kind of, you know, this is where you stand and this is what you do. And I find it interesting, like there's, you know, a lot of work kind of in this vein. Here's another Instagram account called Face Waste. Sorry about all the noise. I've got all the windows open, but hopefully you guys can still hear me. But, you know, discarded masks. And these are going to be a really interesting record of this last kind of year and a half of time that we saw. Let me just go really quick to Hassan's. Okay, so if you're interested, it's called Tracking Transients. And like I said, it's just automated. So he has uploaded tons and tons of stuff and has kind of created a little algorithm that basically just feeds images through this page so that you get to see stuff that he does. And some of them are groupings like this one, and some of them are just the single images. And they're all just kind of like, this is where I'm at. And he feeds all of this information to the FBI. And I believe he still is doing that. I think at some point they were kind of like, please stop, because he almost overloaded them with information. But he's really made a really interesting project about it, and kind of that idea of surveillance and self-surveillance, and then sharing, you know, what we would kind of consider private information with the government in an effort to kind of clear oneself from incrimination. So really, really interesting guy. If we had any money, I would love to bring him in as a speaker, just because it's been really fascinating to hear his story and kind of the idea of how we profile people and what that looks like and what it feels like, and just really, really fascinating stuff. There's also, I think I put a link to where is it? Boop. let me go here. Oh, there we go. It went away. Hold on. Photo typology. Here we go. So in D2L, I know you guys are familiar with D2L. The class is laid out really similar to the way it was in the past, but do read this typology reading. It's really kind of fascinating, and the way that Paul Davis kind of, like I said, categorizes these, gives a little bit of history and talks about some of the kind of more well-known typologists, but then also creates kind of this really interesting little way of, subject, environment, process, and presentation, and then grades them all. And as a design person, I love how it's all nice and clean, but really a good read too. So definitely read that before you start shooting. And then also go ahead and take a peek at the Typologist, which is the Peabody Museum's Diana's Let's Comfy's kind of collection of things. And like I said, she kind of goes all over. So it's really just a nice selection of variety. Here's like different times of day, the same thing. So as you start to think about that, here's one. I love this one with intimacy. There's so many. A lot of times we think of projects as series projects, but the nice thing about typology is it's really more about that consistency and creating a very kind of solid formula for how you're creating your images. So it's not just taking photographs of the same kinds of objects, but in a very systematic way. So check that out too. Feel free to ask me any questions you guys might have, and I look forward to seeing you guys on Tuesday. Ideally, I'd love to critique this on Tuesday, Monday. I'd love to critique a final of this on Monday and see a contact sheet on Friday. I think those are the dates that I put on this. We will probably be able to have a little bit of wiggle room just because I didn't actually get to see you guys this Monday. But please be in touch, shoot me a note, and let me know how things are going, and I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks a bunch. Bye.